Welcome back to Management Made Easy. My management course starts with people. I want to share an important concept with you. People are the center of all management work. To refine your management skills, you must first understand people and their behaviors. Let me begin with a personal experience. Over a decade ago, I visited a company in the north. At lunchtime, we went to the restaurant. In the hallway, there were groups of people, and among our group, the person leading the way was the company's office director, with the chairman and me following behind. To clear the way for us, the director would sometimes push people aside in a very domineering manner. I purposely glanced at the chairman and saw his indifferent expression. At that moment, I thought to myself, this company isn't worth spending much time understanding, despite its good performance. Why did I think this way? It comes from a management concept called the Hawthorne Experiment. The Hawthorne Experiment was conducted 80 years ago at a factory in Hawthorne, USA, led by Professor Mayo from Harvard Business School. You might wonder why I'm referring to an experiment from 80 years ago. Well, many of today's workplace issues, like employee suicides, can be traced back to the Hawthorne Experiment. The background of the Hawthorne Experiment was the rise of scientific management, which significantly overlooked the importance of human factors. In response, Harvard decided to study the human issues in industrial society, which led to the Hawthorne Experiment. The experiment had profound significance, eventually giving rise to the human relations movement, which influenced the development of management, psychology, sociology, and many other fields. The Hawthorne Experiment covered a lot, but here are two key points relevant to today's topic. First, there are very complex interpersonal relationships within a company, including informal organizations. These relationships and organizations hold unique power, which ultimately has a huge impact on the company's productivity. Professor Mayo studied a group working with wire coils. There were 9 coil workers and 3 welders, with the welders assisting the coil workers. In addition, there was a foreman and 2 quality inspectors, who held the most power. Logically, the foreman should have the most authority, followed by the inspectors. However, Mayo discovered that the real influencers on the shop floor were the coil workers, and the power dynamics were reversed. Why? Because the coil workers played a key role in the production process. They decided when to open the windows, when to close them. And these small decisions were how they displayed their status and superiority. This is something you might observe when visiting a construction site. Those with the technical expertise tend to have more influence on site. Mayo also found that the welders who were tasked with assisting the coil workers were the ones who always ran to get lunch. They followed orders, obediently fetching food on time. But the welders also had frustrations, which they took out on the movers. The movers weren't permanent members of the team, so they often faced mockery. For instance, after welding, the welders would spit on the completed terminal posts, and the movers, upon arriving, would see this and share a knowing smile. Mayo further observed that around the key workers, informal subgroups were formed. The purpose of these subgroups was to ensure mutual benefits and resist the foreman's control. To join these subgroups, one needed to balance their performance. Not too outstanding, not too bad, because if someone was too poor, they wouldn't be accepted. Being part of these subgroups meant prioritizing the group's interests. You couldn't stand out too much or get too close to the foreman, and definitely not go behind others' backs to report them. In this context, the common interests of informal organizations were the key to determining productivity, rather than individual abilities or preset organizational goals. This was a key finding of the Hawthorne Experiment. Another aspect of the Hawthorne Experiment was that, over 3.5 years, 20,000 employees were interviewed, leading to an important conclusion. If employees' dissatisfaction could be addressed promptly, their productivity would increase. Otherwise, it would decrease. Remember the story about the office director pushing employees in the hallway? Let me summarize the conclusions from the Hawthorne experiment related to this story, and then we can analyze the case. The experiment found two key insights. First, informal workplace relationships are more influential within a company. Second, employees' emotions are carried into their work and affect efficiency. If you combine these two conclusions, you get the following inference. Negative emotions can spread rapidly through an invisible channel and affect the overall quality and efficiency of the organization. Imagine someone being shoved in the hallway. How would you feel? Unless you're a doormat who's happy about being pushed by your boss, most people would feel frustrated, and they'd likely share their feelings. A strategic person might share it within their small circle among informal group members, but someone who is not strategic would just vent in the office. Either way, that person's negative emotions will affect a few others, and those few will influence even more people. Everyone has their own social circles. As we discussed earlier, people are like ripples in a pond. So, the entire organization could potentially be consumed by negative energy because of the office director's push. Today, I won't focus on leadership, but I must emphasize the role of leaders. Often, leaders act like sparks. When you want to ignite positive energy in an organization, you must use appropriate channels, but these channels can be slow to gain traction. However, if you display inappropriate behavior and spread negative energy, it quickly ignites informal groups, spreading rapidly, infecting every member of the group, and then it spreads to other informal groups. The nature of informal organizations makes their influence powerful. They can easily overwhelm the entire organization. So, leaders' behavior can sometimes be very dangerous. That's why when I saw the office director pushing employees and the chairman remain silent, my management instinct immediately told me this company wouldn't go far, and couldn't become a great company. Let me share a positive example with you to show how important it is to value employees' feelings. I know an entrepreneur who restructured a listed company a few years ago. This company was a state-owned enterprise that had been privatized. Over the course of 10 years, the company had accumulated significant debt. Before this entrepreneur took over, two separate groups had been tasked with managing the company, but both had abandoned the restructuring. This left employees feeling deeply insecure, and eventually, a group incident occurred. When the entrepreneur took over and began restructuring, he noticed that employees looked at him with suspicion and even hostility. His solution was simple. He invited employees to dinner. He told them they could bring their families and have dinner with him, either one-on-one or in groups. Over the course of a few months, he had dinner with over 1,000 employees and their families. At first, the employees vented their frustrations. Then they began sharing suggestions. The longest dinner lasted from 5 p.m. to late at night. 1 year later, the restructuring was successfully completed. Looking back, the entrepreneur said, gaining employee support was more important than solving stock restructuring or bank debt issues. People were the key to the restructuring success. By the way, this entrepreneur only had a junior high school diploma, but after 20 years of business experience, he had a deep understanding of human nature and its importance in business management. So, in the coming weeks, I'll focus on human nature. But the human nature I'll talk about is not the question of whether people are inherently good or evil. Those debates are just good conversation topics over dinner. What I'll all share are the latest brain science research findings that show how people perceive the world, think, and make judgments. I believe that understanding these will help you improve your management skills. All right, that's it for today's lesson. If you still have the energy, I recommend reading Workplace Bullying. This may be a concept you've never heard of before. Workplace bullying, also known as workplace harassment. Did you know? According to Western definitions of workplace bullying, the pushing incident I mentioned earlier wouldn't even qualify as workplace bullying. Quite strange, isn't it? This is Management Made Easy. See you in the next class.